Hey, it's Jared. In this video, I'm reviewing the 85mm lens from Sirui. This is an f1.4, and I have to say, it is a G Master contender with a few compromises, but if you compare the pricing, compromises may be worth it. So we're gonna first look at the lens. We'll compare it a little bit to the G Master, but I don't wanna make this too much about a comparison, but it's hard not to because I have both the lens from Sirui, and then I also have the 85mm G Master 2 over here, the latest version. And then of course, prior to that, I had the G Master first generation lens, which I actually still have. I'm probably going to be listing it on eBay or something like that soon. But I was really surprised when I got contacted by Sirui and they were wanting to send me that lens. Full disclosure, they did send the lens to me and I do get to keep the lens. But I approached this rather pessimistically, as I often do when companies send me lenses, because I shoot primarily with G Master lenses. I shoot professionally, and so I want the best lens, the fastest lens, the best performing lens that there is. And I'm not going to compromise when it comes to performance because I'm shooting professionally and I'm charging for my work. I want my clients to get the best work that they possibly can, and that means having the best tools that I could provide them. And with this lens, I'm just really blown away and surprised. Not only is it extremely compact, but it performs very well, especially for the price. And so we're going to take a look at the lens. We'll look at some photos that I shot with it, and then we'll do some comparison photos between the G Master and the Sirui 85mm f1.4. So let's take a look at the lens and do a walk around. We've got a click button here and declick, and so we've got the aperture ring. We have a nice click to it. We can declick that for a nice smooth aperture ring. So if you're shooting video, you might want to kind of feather your exposure a little bit, and so declicking this is nice. But if you are shooting photos and you want to be in manual, it's nice to have a clicked aperture ring so that you can just get to a nice stop and not necessarily have to have a visual on the ring. The click makes it nice and tactile. On the other side of the lens, you have the autofocus lock button. Just like on the G Master, you press down that button and it locks the focus so the camera will not continue to search. We also have a nice large autofocus manual focus button here as well, and a pretty good sized focus ring also. What I do like about the lens hood is that it has a grip on it, which makes it nice and easy for rotating and removing or putting on the lens. The grip just makes it so much easier to grip the lens hood and take it off. We've got a nice 67mm lens cap here, and this is 67mm. It's probably one of the few differences that you'll find between this lens and the G Master. This G Master Series 2 is 77mm. This is 67mm, so there is a bit of a difference there, but they're still able to get the same specs as far as minimum focus distance, the max aperture, and all of that stuff. I was blown away. When I first put on this lens, things that I don't typically do with an 85mm is get really close to things. So minimum focus distance typically is not a thing that I'm messing with. But when I'm trying out a new lens, I'm all over the place. I'm shooting close, I'm shooting far, I'm trying different things, and I was blown away that this has the same 2.79 feet or 0.85 meter focus distance as the G Master, the G Master Series 2, mind you. And so that really surprised me. I was thinking that, so you can see here we've got 0.85 meter, 2.79 feet, same here, just a 10mm difference on the filter size, but otherwise those specs are the same. This is also an f1.4, that's an f1.4. Full frame lens. So I was really blown away at the fact that they were able to get those same specs essentially out of a smaller compact lens. If you look at both of these lenses side by side, you can see that there's a substantial difference in size. This camera here is the A7C II and this is the A7CR. They're essentially the same exact camera body as far as size goes, but what we've got here as a notable difference in the lens size. So that was one of the first things that kind of blew me away. And I kept going back and forth to the 85mm G Master to look and make sure that the specs that I was seeing were the exact same. And sure enough, they were. And that was surprising because what's definitely not the same is the price. One would think that there's probably some compromises, like this thing might autofocus slowly. Nope, not the case. Check this out. Boom, autofocus achieved extremely fast. And this is a pretty low light scenario with the camera looking off into the darkness, all the light being on this side of the room. So I was pleasantly surprised. First thing that I shot with this lens was a bunch of sports. My son had a couple of basketball games, so I had this lens on the A7CR and I was shooting shooting sports, and I have to say, I was really impressed with how fast the lens was. It didn't matter whether I was shooting or stopped down just a little bit, the lens seemed to respond really well. Let's take a look at some of those images. All right, so these are all photos that I took with the Sirui 85mm 1.4. And so I'll just toggle through some of these, and over here on the right-hand side, you can see the camera settings. A lot of these I was shooting around 1/400th of a second. At like f2.5, I was trying to keep the aperture rather wide to have a shallow depth of field, which obviously is going to make the camera and the lens work a little bit harder. So as I navigate through some of these, shooting with the A7CR, it's not the fastest camera. It's definitely a bit slower in continuous mode. And so I did have some missed shots, but only because the camera isn't super fast. I probably should have been shooting with the A7C2, which definitely shoots continuous faster, albeit at a lower resolution. So as we kind of toggle through some of these, I'm definitely getting nice, really sharp shots, especially with a lot of movement. As we get in nice and close here, you can see everything's looking good. There's a little bit of noise in the shot, and that's mostly to do with the fact that I am shooting at ISO 1000, trying to make sure that I could freeze some of the action as well as get a decently exposed shot. So have to say, like, pretty impressed with most of these images. I also did shoot some with the 85mm G Master so that I can see if there's any frustrations that I felt in the moment while shooting. I didn't notice what lens I had on the camera. The lens didn't draw any attention to itself. It was performing just as the 85mm G Master. I didn't feel like it was missing focus, it was too slow to respond, or anything like that. If anything, it was most likely the A7CR being a little too slow for sport situations. So now let's go and look at some comparison photos. We've got a couple of images here that I shot in comparison, so let's go ahead and do a side-by-side. Just the American flag outside of my house. This one, obviously, I tried to get the same exact shot, but the wind did move the flag a little bit. So the focus point is not exactly perfect. And some of these folds here are slightly different. While this image over here looks less contrasty than this one, it's simply because the flag moved a little bit. I have a couple of better comparisons when it comes to that. But as far as the focus fall off here, and it can also be a little bit challenging with fabric like this. What I do see though, as I start to get up towards the out of focus areas, is a little bit of more yellowing around the edges here. You can see really getting in close here. There's nothing there, no color, nothing, no aberrations that are taking place there. But over here, I can see a little bit of that. That may become more apparent as we look at some other images. So let's take a look at the Ford Ranger logo here. The only thing that's weird about this image was that it was starting to snow a little bit, and it was snowing here, and it hadn't started snowing yet here. And so there's a little bit of blur there because of some piece of snow that just happened to land in my shot. But if we look at what I had as the center point of focus, which is the N in Ranger, you can see little bits of difference in sharpness here. So on the left-hand side, we have the Sony, just as in the last image. On the right-hand side, we have the Sirui 85mm, as you can see up here. We've got the same camera settings on both of these. So both are at f1.4, 1/250th of a second, and ISO 100. And I have to say, I think that it's a little bit sharper. And as you can tell by the crop, I mean, I was pretty much positioned in the exact same location. I say maybe I got a smidge closer with the 85mm G Master over here. But as we start to kind of get to the outer edges, you could see more smoothing here and some, I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily like what's going on. You can see some purple, some different aberrations that are taking place over here. There's smoothing taking place here. You can even see a little bit of a difference, and maybe it's a slight camera angle difference. I was trying my best to get the exact same angle and distance, but there is a little bit of a difference here. And what I'm seeing in this edge of this image is a little bit of purple that's taking place. Definitely not much to see as we get all the way out here to the edges, because the main focus was the Ranger logo. Maybe if we look at the scratch in the Ranger's paint here, you can see a little bit of a difference in the focus fall off there as well, but definitely not as big of a difference as what we can see in the actual Ranger logo. And as we come over to this side, We don't have the purple, we have the yellow aberrations, and they're pretty apparent right here. I mean, pretty noticeable, but I mean, that is not something that's too terrible if I was to look at this image. And so we've got the Sirui image here. All I'd have to do is go and maybe turn on remove chromatic aberration, and that may take care of it. Hasn't taken care of enough of it. There's definitely no camera profile for this lens yet. And so I definitely have to go in here and do some manual adjusting, because it seems like just removing chromatic aberration is not working. So I might need to go in and make some manual adjustments here as well, just to get rid of some of that fringing. Let's see if we can get rid of that here. There's definitely, you can see that yellowing there, and that helped a little bit. Might need to feather that out a little bit just to expand the range. It's removing it pretty well now. There's a little tiny bit left. If I spent a bit more time, or perhaps went into Lightroom Classic instead, I could probably get rid of the rest of that. So it's not the end of the world. Yes, there is that aberration there, but it's definitely not the end of the world. Let's go ahead and look at two more images side by side. So here's a little bit more of a lower light scenario. I was still shooting wide open at f1.4, but I was at 1250 ISO. And we can see, let's see, we've got the Sony on the left, and we've got the Sirui over on the right. And you can see a little bit of a difference here, especially in the texture of the lemon. Now, I was positioned in the exact same spot. Lighting didn't change, nothing changed here. But you can see some hot spots in this image. And if we start to look around the edges of the lemon, you can see the differences in the noise and the fall off of the noise as well. So this is what was probably the most interesting to me as I was looking at this image, was the differences in noise. It's a lot smoother here, and you can see kind of a hard edge around the outer edge of this lemon here. It's almost like an onion skin of sorts or something. I don't know. There's just a line going all the way around it, as opposed to over here, it's definitely much smoother. And if we go off into the corner and start to look over in the corner, you can also see the differences in the fall off as the reflection of the light off of whatever it was that was behind this, my oven, I think. It was behind this, a little bit of a reflection there, and that looks a little bit different. The highlight on the side of this orange definitely looks a bit different. And so there's some things that are different as we look at this image and we start to compare the edges of things. But this is pixel peeping. This is getting very close and trying to look for problems. These are problems that don't exist when you go out and look at the full-size image. There just isn't really much of a difference here when we look at things from afar. But when we get in close, we can see the differences. And if that is a big enough of a deal for you to justify spending extra money on something like a G Master, then more power to you. But for me, I can't see enough of a difference when I'm looking at a full image. So I would only notice big differences if I was cropping in. So let's take a look at this model of a motorhome that my grandfather built, and let's just take a look. So this is a portrait image, and another kind of low light situation. I did stop down to f2.0, so we're at 1/100th f2 and 1250 ISO. And if we look at the images, we can see a lot more detail in the highlights on this image. A lot more blown out highlights here. This is more of just a natural light. We had window light coming in. I'm pretty much positioned the same. If you look at the images side by side here, these are not cropped. I'm pretty much positioned the exact same. And so nothing changed there. Yet we've got a lot more detail over here in this image as we get in really close. And I was trying to position myself at minimum focus distance. And so I was trying to be at like whatever that is, the 2.79 feet away. I was probably closer to 3 feet away, but I was pretty close to the point where the camera would not focus unless I backed up a little bit. So as we look at some of these details here, I mean, you can't make out what it says here on either of these images, but you can see a little bit more detail there. Also, when you look down at the license plate here, you can't make out the numbers and the letters on the license plate, but you can see more of it. There's more detail there than there is on this Sirui lens. Like I said, this is pixel peeping. Now, one thing that I did notice is off in the corners here, you can see how dark and black this area is and how light and noisy it is over here. Now, I don't know necessarily what I like better. I can always darken this up in editing. I do kind of like the fact that there's more light over here, because if I was in a really low light situation, perhaps I'd be able to pull a little bit more detail out of this image here. I don't really know. It's hard to say. And really only more time and more scenarios in which I could shoot in would give me more of an opportunity to know that. But I just have to say, like, the blown out area here, I'm not a fan of. Of course, this could just be the situation. I tried my best to get as close as possible. Obviously, with the light coming in from outside, minute things could have changed in the 30 seconds that it took for me to change lenses. But I don't know. I also have consistencies over here, also in some of these other images where the Sirui is a little bit brighter. I got them backwards this time. This is the Sirui over here. This is the G Master over here. And then if we look at the American flag, we've got the Sony over on this side now. And maybe if we look at the stars here, we can see even the star a little tiny bit brighter. Not much, not really that much noticeable, but we can see a little bit more exposure here. So let's just zoom in a lot and see. I really can't tell a whole lot about the exposure difference here. Slight differences in the image. You can see we've got the Sony over here on this side again and the Sirui over on this side. And you can see that there's some colors coming through with the fiber. Like as I really zoom in, I almost like the Sirui image better just because it's smoother and not as sharp. And I'm not seeing colorization. I don't really know what all of that is. I'm not seeing it over here, but I'm definitely seeing it on the Sony side. So now we can pixel peep until we're blue in the face, but what it really comes down to is the fact that this is a $499 lens compared to a $1,798 lens here in the US. So that's quite a bit of a difference in price between these two lenses. And in all the situations that I found myself testing both of these lenses and trying the Sirui lens, I definitely don't see a $1,300 price difference there. The Sirui lens is absolutely fantastic and performs really well for the price. I didn't even know the price until the time that I started recording this video. I didn't want the price point to muddy the waters for me. So I started looking that stuff up right before I sat down and looked at recording this video. So I'm blown away at the performance for the price at $499 for this full frame lens that has darn near the exact same specs as the 85mm G Master. Now, what I haven't done is substantially tested it shooting video, but in the few shots that I had taken with it, it seemed to respond pretty quickly and it wasn't any noisier than I was used to with the 85mm G Master. I don't have anything else left to say other than $499 for an amazing lens that has fantastic performance. You'd have to really want the Sony G Master badging and of course the little bits of performance improvements that the G Master lens seems to have to justify that extra $1,300. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below. $500 lens versus $1,800 lens essentially. What's your choice and what are your thoughts on Sirui's 85mm f1.4 G Master competitor? Let me know down in the comment section below. Make sure to check out the links in the description. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you back in the next one.